Before we get started, everybody got a sheet? All right, so last week we finally saw the Israelite nation got out from captivity, crossed the Red Sea, and they start their journey into the wilderness. God was faithful and brought them out of bondage, and is going to lead them into the land of Canaan to fulfill the promise he made to Abraham of them having a nation flowing with milk and honey. Today we're going to look at their journey as they start into the wilderness. Does anybody know the new memory verse?
I don't know the old one.
Go ahead, Ma.
God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. Exodus 21:3. Brown nosers.
She has a very, very good memory. They say opposites attract.
Well, that's the way with Ben and Nick.
Yeah? So he's the quiet one? So he's the quiet one? You guys just switched roles?
Hey, when he played football, some guy that he was, I think they guard, no, he was supposed to hit him. He didn't like the guy. He put the guy off the field into the bleachers and broke his arm. You don't mess with him.
Nope. Okay. So back to the study. It's only been a short time since Israel left Egypt. Approximately what? 2 million people, along with all their flocks and their herds, made it through the Red Sea and went to the Sinai Peninsula, which today is in modern-day Egypt. God's leading them where? Back to Mount Sinai, where he promised Moses he would take them to worship him. But how are 2 million people, when flocks and herds, are going to survive in a desert? That's what we're going to pick up today in Exodus chapter 15. We'll start in verse 22.
But didn't they know when they left to go across the Red Sea? Don't you think their faith told them God was going to provide?
You would think their faith would tell them God's going to provide. Let's see how they do, though. We are going to get into that in a minute here. Exodus 15, starting in 22. Then Moses made Israel set out from the Red Sea, and they went into the wilderness of Shur. They went 3 days into the wilderness and found no water. When they came to Moriah, they could not drink the water of Moriah because it was bitter. Therefore it was named Moriah. And the people grumbled against Moses, saying, What shall we drink? And he cried out to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a log. And he threw it into the water, and the water became sweet. There the Lord made for them a statue and a rule that they were to, and there he tested them, saying, If you diligently listen to the voice of the Lord your God, and do which is right in his eyes, and give ear to his commands, and keep all his statutes, I will put none of the diseases on you that I put on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord your healer. Then they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs of water and 70 palms, and they encamped there by the water. So where does Moses lead the people? To the wilderness of Shur, yep. How long have they traveled from the Red Sea? 3 days. And then what are they lacking? Yeah, shade too, yep. So where did they find water? Morai.
You said they found 7 wells?
They find 7 springs after Morai when they go to Elam.
They really couldn't find any until they went to the Lord, and did he give them a tree or something, show them a tree?
Close. Close. But they find it at Morai. They find water. But what does Morai mean? Bitterness. So it was undrinkable water that they find. So how do the people respond? They complained. At who? Moses. How does Moses respond? He cries out to God. And what does God tell Moses to do? A tree, a log. Cast it into the water and it'll make it sweet. Is it a natural remedy for the water or is it a miracle? It's a miracle. There's no known tree you can cast into bitter water and make it sweet and drinkable, but there's some that argue it's just a natural, but nobody can name the tree. So it's a miracle.
70 palm trees wouldn't have covered several million anyway.
No, but they're not even there yet.
I know, we're going to talk about it later.
Yeah, we're still in Moriah. We haven't made it to Elam. So what was the purpose of God bringing his people to bitter waters that they couldn't drink? To test them, to see if they'd trust and rely on him. How did the people do? Terrible. They didn't cry out to God at all, did they?
Nope.
They grumbled against Moses. What statute did God establish with the people at Moriah? If you trust me, obey my commands, listen to my words, no gods before me, I won't give you the diseases of Egypt. I'll be your healer instead. Then, Judy, where do they move?
Well, I'm hoping they finally went to those shade trees.
They do. They move to the shade trees in the Elam. Interesting. Couldn't God have just led them there first?
No.
To, drinkable water and shade trees? But he was testing them. We often go through tests. So once again, God provides in a miraculous way. He gives them water in the middle of a desert. If we flip ahead to chapter 17, we see they run into the same problem again. They're in the desert with no water, and God commands Moses to strike a rock, and the water pours out from it. Moses calls that place Masai, which means testing, or Meribah, which means quarreling, in the light of how the people respond again there. There, they get a little worse. They're doing a little more in chapter 17 than grumbling against Moses. They're threatening to kill him.
I think there's a proverb that says something about that, similar to that. Something about no matter what man's ideas are, it's the purpose of God that's going to prevail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Our purpose, our plan, our will doesn't really matter when it compares to God's. Now, we give them a hard time because it's, 3 days since they've seen the last giant miracle. How long does it take you to die of dehydration? 3 days. So these are mothers and fathers with their little children on the brink of death. So I don't usually cut them slack, but when you look at it from that side, they're desperate. You're seeing your little kid almost dead from dehydration. You tend to act a little crazy.
Ooh, they wouldn't even be able to get saliva, would they?
No. And that's 3 days in optimal conditions. They're walking through a desert. You got 3 to 4 days with no water. In a desert, it's usually 2, maybe 3 days, and you're dead because you sweat out every ounce of water you have to begin with. So
Would you get skinny?
you'd lose that 30 pounds of water weight or whatever we all carry around, but 3 days ain't enough for me to get skinny. I'm going to need a lot longer in the desert. But it's pretty bad for them. But the whole point of the test was they seen God has power over everything. He made that perfectly clear in Egypt. The only test was to cry out and depend on him. Instead, they grumbled towards Moses. But God's still faithful to his promise that he's going to bring a nation to a promised land that he promised to Abraham, provides them water anyhow. And Paul in the New Testament takes all this and points it towards Jesus in 1 Corinthians chapter 10. We'll do verses 1 through 13. For I do not want you to be unaware, brothers, that our fathers were all under the cloud and all passed through the sea, and were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea. And they all ate the same spiritual food, and all drank from the same spiritual drink. For they drank from the spiritual rock that followed them, and the rock was Christ. Nevertheless, with most of them God was not pleased, for they were overthrown in the wilderness. Now these things took place as example for us, that we may not desire evil as they did. Do not be idolaters as some of them were, for it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. We must not indulge in sexual immorality, as some of them did, and 23,000 fell in a single day. We must not put Christ to the test, as some of them did and were destroyed by serpents. Nor grumble, as some of them did and were destroyed by the destroyer. Now these things happened to them as an example, but they are written down for our instruction, on whom the end of the age has come. Therefore, lest anyone who thinks he stands take heed lest he fall. No temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. God is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. But with the temptation, he will also provide the way of escape, that you may be able to endure it. So the Apostle Paul connects the spiritual truth with the physical provisions that the Israelites had in the desert, their needs for water. You can see the illusion of the pillar of cloud, the crossing of the sea, the water, the food, all connects to Christ, God's provision for all mankind. Christ is the provider of guidance and the water in the desert and the living water for all Christians today. We also hear Paul warning to not be like those who grumbled against God. But Judy, we'll get to that in a little bit. Everybody should have their paper. God provided, no wait, we're not to that yet. God provided meat and bread. I think that's in your book. It's not a paper. Yeah, we'll just move into the next section. Exodus 16. Oh, another long one. 1 through 36. They set out from Elim, and all the congregation of the people of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month, and they departed from the land of Egypt. And the whole congregation of the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the people of Israel said to them, would that we would have died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, where we sat by meat pots and ate bread to the full. For you have brought us out into the wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. Then the Lord said to Moses, behold, I am about to rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them, whether they will walk in my law or not. On the sixth day, when they prepared what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather daily. So Moses and Aaron said to all the people of Israel, at evening you shall know that it is the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt. And in the morning you shall see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your grumbling against the Lord. For what are we that you grumble against us? And Moses said, when the Lord gives you in the evening meat to eat, and in the morning bread to the full, because the Lord has heard your grumbling, that you grumble against him, what are we? Your grumbling is not against us, but against the Lord. Then Moses said to Aaron, say to the whole congregation of the people of Israel, come near before the Lord, for he has heard your grumbling. And as soon as Aaron spoke to the whole congregation of the people of Israel, they looked toward the wilderness, and behold, the glory of the Lord appeared in a cloud. And the Lord said to Moses, I have heard the grumbling of the people of Israel. Say to them, at twilight you shall eat meat, and in the morning you shall be filled with bread. Then you shall know that I am the Lord your God. In the evening, quail came up and covered the camp. In the morning, dew lay around at the camp. And when the dew had gone up, there was on the face of the wilderness a fine flake-like thing, fine as frost on the ground. When the people of Israel saw it, they said to one another, "What is it?" For they did not know what it was. And Moses said to them, "It is the bread that the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Gather of it, each one of you, as much as he can eat. You shall each take an omer, according to the number of the persons that each of you has in his tent." And the people of Israel did so. They gathered, some more, some less. But when they measured it with an omer, whoever gathered much had nothing left over, and whoever gathered little had no lack. Each of them gathered as much as he could eat. And Moses said to them, "Let no one leave any of it over till the morning." But they didn't listen to Moses. Some left part of it till morning, and it bred worms and stank. And Moses was angry with them. Morning by morning they gathered it, each as much as he could eat. But when the sun grew hot, it melted. On the 6th day they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers each. And when all the leaders of the congregation came and told Moses, he said to them, "This is what the Lord has commanded. Tomorrow is a day of solemn rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you will bake and boil what you will boil, and all that is left over set aside to be kept till morning." So they laid it aside till morning, as Moses commanded them, and it did not stink, and there were no worms in it. Moses said, "Eat it today, for today is a Sabbath to the Lord. Today you will not find it in the field. 6 days you will gather it, but on the 7th day, which is the Sabbath, there will be none." On the 7th day, some people went out to gather, but they found none. And the Lord said to Moses, "How long will you refuse to keep my commandments and my laws? See, the Lord gives you a Sabbath, therefore, in the 6th day, he gives you bread for 2 days. Remain each of you in his place, and let no one go out of this place on the 7th day." So the people rested on the 7th day. Now the house of Israel called its name manna. It was like coriander seed, white, with the taste of it was like wafers made with honey. Moses said, "This is what the Lord has commanded. Let an omer of it be kept throughout their generations, so that they may see the bread which I fed you in the wilderness, when I brought you out of the land of Egypt." And Moses said to Aaron, "Take a jar and put an omer of manna in it, and place it before the Lord to be kept throughout the generations." As the Lord commanded Moses, so Aaron placed it before the testimony to be kept. The people of Israel ate the manna 40 years till they came into the inhabitable land. They ate the manna till they came to the border of the land of Canaan. An omer is 1/10 of an ephah. In case you didn't know what an omer was, that helps you figure it out. 2 quarts. An omer is like 2 quarts. 20 quarts.
What is it?
20 quarts.
24.
I don't know why that's at the end, because it didn't help me. I didn't know what an ephah was or an omer without looking them up. It says it in most of your Bibles if you go down into the notes.
My perfect husband forgot ours.
How many cups are in a quart? 4? Yeah, so it'd be 8 cups of bread, of manna. So now how long in this passage have they been away from Egypt? Not yet. That's very end. Moses is writing that in ahead of time. That's like a prelude of what's to come.
But they ate that manna for 40 years.
They did eat manna for 40 years. Can you imagine having a cracker every day for 2 meals a day for 40 years?
Didn't they have wheat?
Quail. Yeah.
They could make it though into like a porridge or bread or something.
They probably could, yeah. Yeah, they could. You could mix it up. My specialty, take a bunch of weird ingredients and make a meal.
And if it was toasted with honey butter.
Hey, it says. says tastes like honey.
Doesn't.
Hmm. Tastes like white as coriander seed and hint of honey or something to that effect. But how long have they been gone now?
It's the 15th day of the second month.
And when's Passover? 14th day of the first month. So they've been gone roughly a month. Mhm.
Why was Moses chosen over Aaron?
I don't know. Why was Moses chosen over Aaron?
They seem equal in what they're doing, but yet it's Moses that the Lord favors.
Yeah. And Moses' mouthpiece, as Moses is God's mouthpiece. It's just his design. I don't know.
You know, God always uses the person that we wouldn't expect him to do, you know. But he grooms them, and he makes them what he wants.
Yeah. Yeah, why did Moses spend 40 years in the palace and 40 years in the desert to mold him into the guy that was going to bring the people out? We go through stuff to be groomed for whatever our calling is. What did the people recall about their lives in Egypt? Had food galore, pots of meat, and all the bread you could eat. But yet, just a few weeks ago, they were crying out to God because the slavery and oppression was too hard. We need freed. Now their only memory is pots of meat and all the food to eat. How quick we forget. So then, who do the people grumble against? Moses and Aaron, yep. And who does Moses and Aaron tell them they're really grumbling against? Yeah, God. Who are we? We are nobody. How does God intend to test the people in verse 4? Now, why gather so much just every day? It'll learn you to be trusting and dependent. How did God make his presence known to the people? Yep, in a cloud, his glory shone. It's midday, so you can imagine how bright the cloud must have been to outshine the sun. How did God intend to show them that he was indeed the Lord their God? By giving him meat in the evening and bread in the morning. Can you imagine the amount of quail that had to come in to feed 2 million people? I can imagine that size flock of quail. There's a debate whether that was every day they ate that or one-time special occasion and the rest of the time was manna. We know for sure it happened once. It doesn't really relate if they did it every day for 40 years. Yeah, he could. And their animals. Yeah, so they'd be eating whatever grass they found in the desert. There's not a whole lot in the desert. But as they move up in, they get closer to the promised land. They're out of desert area and they're more into grasslands like where Abraham was roaming around. Yeah. We estimate the 2 million. We're only told of the men. The Bible doesn't give us any number other than the men. Yeah. Yeah. And that number's not in there. They just give us the men, so we double it for the wives and add 2 children. No birth control, so you figure every husband and wife has probably 2 kids. And it gets us to an estimation of 2 million people. Yeah. It says in that section, it covered the camp. You couldn't see the camp for the amount of quail that came in just to feed them. What was provided in the morning? Manna. How do the people describe it? What do they call it?
White laying on the ground.
What? Frosty. They say, what is it? What does manna mean? So they named it, what is it? Manna means literally, what is it? They weren't real creative back then.
The word manna means what is it?
Hmm. They,
I thought it meant bread.
they named it, what is it? What were their instructions for each day's supply? Only gather what you can eat. Don't save any till morning.
But they were allowed to gather for the whole family, right?
Yeah, the whole family, one omar apiece. Eat it before the end of the day. How was the sixth day different? They could twice as much, and it wouldn't spoil overnight. That should tell them God's in control if he can make it spoil one night and not the next. And fast forward, the one that they put in the jar to save for all time still probably has not rotted, though we don't know where the ark is right now. It's still in the Ark of the Covenant. Some 3,500 years. And hasn't rotted yet. Because God said it will last for all generations. What is this? How long did God provide manna? 40 years. Was it supposed to be 40 years? We'll fast forward into what we haven't read yet. It's interesting. We say they ate it for 40 years. They're only supposed to eat it for a couple months. They're the ones, when they got to Canaan, said, we can't go in, there's giants. And God said, okay, well, wander and eat manna for 40 years. So what an amazing way to provide for his people. Even though they complained and wanted to go back to slavery, God provides them with food, provides them with water, gives them mercy when he should give them judgment, gives them grace when they don't deserve it, sends them quail, sends them bread, meets every need they have.
It's a typical father.
Yeah.
You know, when you're taking care of your children, sometimes you try to tell them what to do, and they sort of don't want to listen to some of it. And then
Yours were just sorta?
have to-
Mine were not just sorta. I tell them go left, they go right. It just didn't make a lick of sense. But yeah, but we still keep telling them. We still keep providing until, we can't. Some claim that this miracle of providing manna is impossible. It's just put in here to embellish the story. But then what does Jesus do likewise to this in the New Testament? Fish and loaves. And feeds 5,000 people? Yeah, 5,000 men, not including women and children. John chapter 6, we'll move to next. How Jesus relates himself to the manna. We'll start in verse 32. Jesus said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, it was not Moses who gave you bread from heaven, but my Father gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is he who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. They said to him, Sir, give us this bread always. Jesus said to them, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger, and whoever believes in me shall never thirst. But I said to you that you have seen me, and yet you do not believe. All that the Father gives me will come to me, and whoever comes to me I will never cast out. For I have come down from heaven not to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me. And this is the will of him who sent me, that I should lose nothing of all that he has given me, but raise it up on the last day. For this is the will of my Father, that everyone who looks on the Son and believes in him should have eternal life, and I will raise him up on the last day. So Jesus portrays himself as the bread. The manna in the desert is just another account in the Old Testament God uses to point forward to the Savior he was going to send. Okay. Now you guys should have this sheet. Try to get through some of it quick. We got a few minutes left. All right, Exodus 5, 20 and 21. Exodus 5, or 6, 5 through 9. What's the complaint? It's against Moses and God for making labor hard and under the threat of death and even rejecting God's reassurance. I should have probably just made you guys the answer key. I can do that after if you guys want it. God's response is he affirmed his covenant and promised to rescue them and lead them to the promised land. Exodus 14, 10 through 15. The complaint is against Moses for leading them into the wilderness to die rather than leaving them as slaves in Egypt. And God's response to it told Moses to move forward. (15, 23 through 25). The complaint is to Moses because they had no water after 3 days. God's response is he purified the bitter water so they could drink. (16, 2 through 15). They complained to Moses against God because they did not have any meat or bread like they had in Egypt. God's response, he gives them quail and gives them manna. (17, 1 through 7). They complain against Moses again for not having water and wanting all of them to die, doubting that God was even among them. So it's about water again. And this is the one where God instructs Moses to strike the rock with his staff and water comes out of the rock. So as you answer these questions, what did you write down regarding on how God meets their needs? Even when they complained against him, he still met all their needs. I guess we'll do the last 4 questions on your complaint answer key. Were the Israelites focusing on God and his character or their circumstances? Circumstances. Did they have any need that God had not met? Nope. The next one's pretty much your own question. Are there any needs in your life that God's not meeting? I'll let you finish the last 3 because they're personal to you. I can't answer if there's none not meeting or what it is. Or what should be our attitude towards complaining about circumstances? Yep, we don't complain. We go to the Lord. He's the one that provides. He's the one that gets us through it, and he's the one that put us there for a reason. And if we don't learn what we're supposed to learn, We'll go through it again. I've done that stubborn thing so many times.
It seems like he, puts things in our paths too to bring us back.
Yeah.
You know, it might not be the way we think it should have been, but it's usually.
Yeah. It's a good thing we're not in charge, though. I would make a mess of it. All right, let's go to Lord in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you that even though we don't understand your plan, we can't fully see it. Sometimes we grumble, sometimes we complain, sometimes we fight and argue and try to find ways out of it. You continue to provide for us because you are faithful in spite of us, not because of us. We thank you that you're always working us towards your will for good in your eyes, not in our understanding. Lord, guide us each this week as we go out in the same way, to be good for your kingdom, for your glory.